cannot make assumptions. We may get a second peak in this wave.
Crowds apparent as a cooped-up country reopens. Data shows more states are heading in the wrong direction.
Anyone who is involved this weekend in any sort of crowded event should just self-quarantine.
Gives me pause to think about what we may see next week or two when people get back to their communities from vacationing down the Gulf Coast.
This is now the 10th team that's in human clinical trials trying out their experimental COVID vaccines.
The world basically is going to have to vaccinate its way out of this pandemic, and I think the standard way of doing it is just too slow.
This is New Day with Allison Camerata and John Berman.
Welcome to our viewers in the United States and all around the world. This is New Day. It's Tuesday, May 26th, 6 o'clock here in New York. And this morning, an important marker. The city that saw the first real coronavirus outbreak on the East Coast, the original hotspot here, begins phased reopening this morning after nearly 3 months. Nationwide this morning, though, there are some new worries. 17 states are seeing an increase in new cases, with 5 of them up more than 50%. 13 states are holding steady and 20 are experiencing a decline. It will be weeks until we know whether relaxed restrictions from the Memorial Day weekend causes cases to spike. Some health officials in parts of Missouri are now calling on everyone who attended this packed pool party in the Ozarks to self-quarantine.
John, there's also new information this morning about the impact of coronavirus on children. A majority of states are now investigating hundreds of cases of that pediatric inflammatory syndrome. These cases are very rare. At the moment, we only know of 350, which of course is a fraction of the total amount of cases. But these cases with children could have a big impact on the thinking of reopening camps and schools. So we have a lot to get to this morning. Let's begin with CNN's Bryn Gingras. She is live in New Rochelle, New York, where it is a new day. Bryn.
It certainly is, Allison. Good morning. Really, across the country, though, it was hit or miss over this holiday weekend when it came to those safety precautions, wearing masks, keeping social distancing. This as the country is nearing that devastating milestone of 100,000 deaths due to the coronavirus. But here in New Rochelle, you're right, it is a new day. Officials are saying be smart, be safe. Remember, this area was one of the first to shut down in the entire country because of that hotspot. And people here want to look forward, not back. New Rochelle, New York was the state's first coronavirus epicenter, and this morning it's part of 2 regions scheduled to begin reopening this week. Governor Andrew Cuomo reminding New Yorkers it's important to stay smart.
The number goes down until you go out and don't do the PPE and don't do the mask, and then the number will go up. And who's going to determine what happens to the number? The person in the mirror.
At least 17 states are seeing an uptick in coronavirus cases over the past week, including Arkansas, where some enjoyed the weather without taking safety precautions.
I see I'm not the only person. You see no mask here. You see no fear.
The governor urging people to be more responsible.
When you wear a mask, you're expressing your concern of someone else. So we're trying to set the right example, continue to do that.
Cases are also increasing in Alabama, where crowded beaches last weekend concerned local leaders like the mayor of Montgomery, who earlier warned his city is critically low on ICU beds.
It gives me pause to think about what we may see the next week or two when people get back to their communities from vacationing down the Gulf Coast. It's problematic for me that people are cavalier about their behavior.
Chilly weather keeping crowds light at some northeastern beaches. At Delaware's Rehoboth Beach, face coverings are mandatory on the boardwalk and encouraged on its shores.
I was very impressed with what I saw, and I feel very much more comfortable about rolling into the 1st of June.
But at this New Jersey beach, most people who walked the boardwalk did so without covering their faces. Officials in St. Louis asking people who attended events like this pool party in the Ozarks to self-quarantine for 14 days.
The risk of contracting COVID-19 is exponentially increased.
Take a look at this crowd in Texas, all river tubing in close proximity.
If I get it, everybody else getting it. Hey. It's life.
And this social media video from Houston showing a pool party at a club with very few masks in sight. Houston's mayor says police will begin enforcing capacity limits after hundreds of social distancing complaints over the holiday weekend.
We have to pump the brakes. There are some who are pretending as though this virus no longer exists. And quite frankly, it's not only endangering themselves and those who are at these gatherings, but they're endangering everybody else when they leave these gatherings.
Now, we are in the original containment zone here in New Rochelle, the area where the National Guard was stationed just 3 months ago. Now we know that this area is opening. Contact tracers were trained over the holiday weekend, but it's not just here. It's a total of 7 counties in New York that can reopen and begin phase 1, John. And that, of course, includes manufacturing, construction, and retail pickup. John?
Look, it's been a long time coming. It's taken a lot of hard work in these regions, with social distancing really at a premium there. Brent Gingras, thanks very much for being with us. Joining us now is Dr. Juan Dumois. He's a pediatric infectious diseases physician at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. And CNN political analyst Margaret Talev. She's the politics and White House editor at Axios. And guys, and doctor, I want to throw up on the screen just so people see it again, the pictures that we saw all weekend long of people out there partying, close to each other, all over each other. At the Ozarks, there was this pool party. And now you have local health officials in the Kansas City area and the St. Louis area saying, look, you know, if you live in our counties and you went down to this pool party, we want you to self-quarantine because you could be at risk right now. When you see these pictures and when you know that things like this were happening all over the country, doctor, what can be done at this point? It does seem like Pandora's box has been opened and people are just out doing their thing. So how does one control or try to mitigate possible damage here?
Well, I think we just need to keep getting the message out there that this virus is not gone and that avoiding of social distancing is just giving the coronavirus more opportunities to very quickly spread to other people. And in areas that have already seen maybe a decrease in the number of daily cases, they're going to start seeing an increase in a few weeks.
But Dr. Dumois, isn't it true that in terms of the super spreader events that we saw back in March, the Biogen convention, the cocktail parties, they were all indoors. And so isn't it harder to spread the virus outdoors? I mean, I don't want to give everybody a license to run out and have a pool party like that, but is it exponentially harder to spread it outdoors than it is indoors?
It depends on the circumstances and the conditions when you're outdoors. If you're outdoors and going for a walk in the park where you're not clustering close to other people, chances are someone who is coughing out the virus will have those particles from their breath dissipate very quickly and blown away by the wind. But if you're in close proximity to other people and you are staying in close proximity, a little bit of a breeze and you're downwind of the person who coughs and is infected, that'll blow right into your face. With your next breath, you're inhaling virus. So it depends on how close you are to these other people and how long you are close to them that increases your risk.
Seems to me that sharing a raft or perhaps sharing a margarita with somebody, it doesn't really matter whether you're inside or outside.
Why do I hear a tinge of envy every time you describe this party?
Look, I have no desire to be near that many people ever, let alone during a pandemic. But Margaret, there's another what I consider to be non-debate going on this morning, and I think it's truly fascinating. So former Vice President Joe Biden went to a Memorial Day observance in Delaware yesterday, and he was wearing a mask. We've seen pictures of it. Perhaps we can see them again. You can see him there in the black mask. The president and his wife went to services. They were not wearing a mask. Now, what's interesting to me is that Brit Hume of Fox TV put out a tweet of a picture of Joe Biden that said, this might explain why Trump doesn't like to wear a mask in public. I'm not sure I get it. I really am not. And the president retweeted this. This is a huge majority issue in the country. 64% of Americans say that we should all be required to wear masks in public. 67% say the president should be required to wear a mask in public. The CDC says you should wear a mask in public. So who's owning whom here? I mean, the president retweeted a picture of Joe Biden doing something that is wildly popular among the American people.
Yeah, well, good morning, John. And you asked, what can we do collectively as a country, right, to try to minimize the spread of this? And wearing the masks is one of those things, not only because it creates a barrier, but because it creates a psychological barrier as well. When you see someone wearing a mask, you're not going to get right up in their face. And so you're right, there is wide bipartisan support for this. Our own weekly polling with Ipsos shows this, but there's also a partisan split. This is an issue that unifies Democrats and to some extent divides Republicans. While most Americans are wearing masks, the support for this is softer among Republicans, and the support for this is softer in rural areas as opposed to urban and suburban areas. So it's like yet become another political Rorschach test. And it's a dangerous one. It's a divisive one. But the president feels that wearing a mask kind of looks silly or projects weakness, and that in situations, at least in his case, where he says he's been tested, he's okay, he has sought not to wear these in public. We'll see on Wednesday when we see him, in Florida. But for Biden, that campaign's feeling is that, at least among their base, it's not only okay to wear a mask, but there is a wide expectation that he should, to send a signal about how others should behave.
But here again, Dr. Dumois, there is a distinction. President Trump didn't wear a mask inside. He went into a crowded Ford plant in Michigan, where it is the law, the state law, to wear a mask. And it was the Ford company's policy that everyone who goes indoors, all visitors, everyone wears a mask. And he was within 6 feet of people. So there's no question there that you should be modeling the good behavior and lawful behavior of wearing a mask. But outdoors, where Vice President Joe Biden was, that is still, as you just said, that's sort of people's judgment. And you have to, and this is where people get confused, because before you head out the door, you try to figure out if you're going for your run or if you're going to a veterans memorial, if you're going to be within 6 feet of someone else.
Yeah, I think that it is incumbent on highly visible politicians and celebrities to show a good example. And it does not make a good example if you're indoors with closely in groups of people and not wearing a mask. It just gives the message that it's not important. And I think that it is.
Look, I wish the words on our screen said Trump retweets picture of Joe Biden doing something wildly popular, or Trump retweets picture of Joe Biden doing something that the CDC recommends that everyone do. And to Margaret's point, 40% of Republicans are supportive of wearing masks in public. There aren't many issues, I think, that Joe Biden can back that have 40% Republican approval here. So, again, I'll leave the medicine to the doctors here, but the politics to me are fairly clear. Margaret, Doctor, thanks very much for being with us.
Okay, another biotech company announcing they are starting human trials for a coronavirus vaccine. We'll tell you about this development and how promising it is next.
Hello again, everybody. The Sesame Street crew is back on CNN. Woo-hoo! For a new family town hall about COVID-19 and staying safe this summer. Parents, submit questions at cnn.com/Sesame Street.
The kids ask the best questions sometimes.
And remember,
we're all in this together.
The ABCs of COVID-19. A new CNN Sesame Street Town Hall for kids and parents. Saturday on CNN.
My name is Adal Sakwe. I'm from Delta State in Nigeria. I currently run a small business that caters to people who are looking for fresh, healthy eating. We have 10 restaurants. We've been fast growing throughout last year. 2020 was meant to be a big year for us for continued growth. And now we're down to only one store that's servicing through deliveries. So it's been a very tough time. Dealing with the employee situation has been one of the most difficult things for me. We definitely don't have enough revenues coming in, or cash flows rather, to pay everybody. But what we did was to ensure that they had food to eat. So we distributed food packs, dry goods that they could eat and that could last for them and their families. From a personal standpoint, I have been alone in my house for the last 5 weeks. And there are moments that I actually want to go crazy. I actually take a step back and I'm like, I want to feel a hug of a loved one. I want to be able to have nice conversations and roll up on the couch and just chat and watch TV together. I'm just trying to keep myself busy so I don't think too much about it, but it is a really tough time that we're all going through across the world.
While the coronavirus pandemic has stifled sport around the world, the time did allow Tottenham striker Harry Kane to fully recover from a hamstring injury that he suffered on January the 1st. And the Spurs star has scored big off the pitch as well, personally sponsoring his former club Leyton Orient shirts for next season, with the home shirt carrying a message of support to frontline workers. The League Two club will then donate 10% of the proceeds of sold shirts to coronavirus relief. The Premier League striker Marcus Rashford has led an initiative to provide nearly 3 million meals a week to vulnerable people across the UK by working with the charity FareShare.
Right now, millions of people are relying on food banks to feed their families.
That's why we're all doing our best
to support the food charity FareShare.
So please click to donate.
For more information on how you can help during this pandemic, go to cnn.com/impact.
She's a two-time Grand Slam champion from Japan, a global sports star taking lockdown one day at a time.
I feel like I want to take this time to learn something new or improve, because I'm pretty sure I won't have this much free time ever again. I've been drawing a lot. I don't know, I can send a picture, but it's really odd to explain. I'm trying to put what I see in my brain on paper.
Have you been keeping in touch with any of the other players?
I actually did an Instagram live workout with Venus just now. And it was kind of more intense than I thought it was going to be. For some reason, I thought we were going to be stretching. But yeah, we were doing a bit of movement drills and then lunges and stuff.
U.S. stock futures are surging. They are up nearly 500 points ahead of the open, thanks to optimism about another potential coronavirus vaccine. The American biotech company Novavax announcing it is starting human trials. CNN's Elizabeth Cohen joins us now with details. What do we know, Elizabeth?
Allison, the word that keeps coming to my mind is preliminary. This is preliminary data, preliminary information. Still important that now a 10th vaccine maker is moving into this field. As you said, the company is called Novavax. They're based in the United States, and they're starting a round of preliminary investigation, if you will, with 130 study subjects. They said that they plan to vaccinate their first volunteer in Australia. That's where they're doing their trials last night. Again, they'll go on to do 130 people. They hope by July to have some information about how these 130 people did. Did the vaccine seem to elicit an immune response? And also, is it safe? So this is the 10th vaccine to join the world scene in human clinical trials. And let's take a look at what is going on around the world. 10 worldwide. This is the 4th in the United States. There are also 5 in China, 1 in the UK, and 114 in preclinical stages, meaning they're not in human clinical trials. They're in the lab. They're doing work with animals. You will notice all of these will not turn into real vaccines that you and I and the world will get, and that's okay. We expect them to start with a lot. The best ones will hopefully succeed. We hope to have several vaccines. Some might work well for certain groups, young people, old people, etc., better than others. John?
All right, Elizabeth Cohen, thanks so much for that information. Really appreciate it. Joining me now is William Haseltine. He's a former professor at Harvard Medical School and Harvard School of Public Health. He's now the chair and president of Access Health International. Professor, it is always an education to have you on. Let's talk about Novavax, just as a peg for what you have been focused on over the last few days. Novavax is the 10th company now to move forward in these vaccine trials. You look at this as a broad subject and say, we need to approach all of this with more caution. Why?
The question that most people ask me and will ask to themselves about the vaccine is, when will we have it? A question a scientist or a doctor asks is if we will have it. At this point, it's not clear that the answer to if is definite. It's not clear that we will definitely have one of these vaccines. And the reason has to do with the virus itself, has to do with the nature of the population that's being vaccinated. Let me point out something that's really obvious. The people who need this vaccine the most are old. Those over 60, 70, 80. Those are exactly the people that have a very difficult time making a good response to any vaccine, whether it's a live vaccine, a killed vaccine, a vaccine in a new kind of particle that the Novavax people are proposing. That's the first question. Second question is, we already know from primate studies, non-human primate studies, and from very preliminary evidence from the first human trial where we have some data that's been published, is that we're not sure what kind of immune response these vaccines are making. Is it really a good one? Will it really protect, or will it partially protect? And if it partially protects, then what's the policy? So my view of all of this is, we know how to control the virus without a drug and without a vaccine. That's happened all over the East, including Australia and New Zealand. Let's use the tools we have now and hope for a better future. But that hope is only a hope.
You talked about the various challenges here. Number one, for whom would the vaccine be most effective, dealing with the older population? And then you mentioned something particular to the virus itself that makes it challenging to find a vaccine. Right. What is that?
Well, we know these are coronaviruses, and we have years and years of experience with coronaviruses. About 1/3 of all the colds you get every year are coronaviruses. And many, many years ago, people did experiments where they infected people, volunteers, to get a cold, not a serious disease, to get a cold. And then a year later came back and used the self-same virus to see if they were protected, and they weren't. We also know from the study of the blood and the serum and the antibodies in people who recover from COVID, from this disease, is that the antibody response is not strong. It's weak. And only a few people out of the whole group make enough antibody that can stop the virus, even in the test tube, much less in real life.
If they are producing neutralizing antibodies, with some of the press releases on these studies, and I know there's a distinction between studies and press releases, but some of these companies are saying they've seen evidence of producing neutralizing antibodies. Is that a positive sign, or why might that be even limited to?
It's not a negative sign, let me put it that way. However, it's not a high level of neutralization, and it doesn't protect the monkeys from getting infected in the nose. In fact, if you look at the Oxford trial, every single one of the vaccinated animals were actually infected. It's true that the virus levels in the lungs were lower, but what about the virus levels in the nasal passages that transmit the viruses? And this virus doesn't just attack the lung. It attacks the vascular system. It attacks the kidney. What else won't be protected by these vaccines? So there are many deep questions, long questions, and this is not going to be over. So there's a final important topic we didn't talk about, which is safety. When you're giving a vaccine to people, you're giving it to healthy people. And you may be giving, in this case, to hundreds of millions, even 1 billion or more healthy people. It has to be really safe. How many people do you have to test the vaccine in before you know it's safe to give to children, adults, and maybe 1 billion or more of them? We haven't ever had really drugs like that. But when we do have drugs that are going to be very broadly tested, it takes hundreds of thousands of people to take the drug before you're ready to release it to the public.
And I know you're also
these are other questions that we have in mind.
I know you're also concerned that in this process, there isn't necessarily a super effective treatment available yet. There is remdesivir, but you have some caution about that as well.
Well, I have a lot of caution about remdesivir. There are 2 studies that came out that have been published now. One, a very detailed study that shows it had no effect at all. In particular, what bothers me is that it didn't touch the virus in the patients where it measured, not in their lungs, not in their nose, nowhere you could measure. They had 3 different samplings of all these patients, nose, rectum, and lung, and there was no effect on the virus concentration. That's the first thing. Another paper came out and said very weak data that said, yeah, if you're really healthy and you take the drug, well, you're sort of sick, you're in the hospital, you take the drug, maybe you get out a couple of days earlier, but there was no supporting virology. I'm a virologist. If a drug is going to work against a virus, it better drop the concentration of the virus in a person. If it doesn't, why is it called an antiviral drug?
Professor?
And that's a really serious question, and it's a problem with the data.
Professor Haseltine, you've raised some very serious questions across the board here this morning. We do appreciate your time coming on. We look forward to speaking to you again soon.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Right. New details about a potential Justice Department investigation into the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. Much more in a live report next.
mess around and be creative.
I have this incredible ability to want to destroy clean spaces.
It's more than just an option to be an artist, it is a calling.
These are very exciting times of our lives as creatives.
Africa Avant-Garde, this weekend on CNN.
I'm Max Foster in London, and this is CNN.
I'm Scott McLean in Madrid, Spain, and this is CNN.
Now to this developing story. The family attorney for the Ahmaud Arbery case tells CNN that the Justice Department has launched a hate crime investigation into his murder. Let's get right to CNN's Martin Savage for the latest. So what does this mean, Marty?
Good morning, Ellison. Well, it is significant news because the family of Ahmaud Arbery, the mother and father and their attorneys, all had the opportunity to meet with representatives from the Department of Justice, which in the state of Georgia would be Bobby Christine. He's the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Georgia. And it was at that meeting that Lee Merritt, who represents the mother, said that the DOJ admitted to them that they are looking into and beginning the investigations at looking at his murder, Ahmaud Arbery's death, as a hate crime. Now, that's significant because, as you know, Georgia is one of the few states, actually one of only 4 states, that has no state hate crime law. So if this is going to be investigated as a potential hate crime, it'll have to be done on the federal level. But it's not the only thing that the feds reportedly are looking into. According to a statement that was released by the attorneys after that meeting, it went on to say, according to Mr. Christine, his office is investigating why it took so long to arrest the individuals responsible for Mr. Arbery's death. This would involve the consideration of both civil and criminal charges against state officials and conspirators involved in the murder of Mr. Arbery. So again, the question is going to be on those first DAs that handled the case and why there was no arrest and why this case seemed to go nowhere for 2 months. So the feds are looking at that as well. 2 significant developments in this case. John and Allison.
Yeah, I got to say, because we don't have answers to those questions, and those are big, glaring questions at this point. Martin Savage, thanks very much for your reporting on this. So now that the Memorial Day weekend is over, warmer weather is on the way for most of the East Coast. Chad Myers has the forecast. Chad, where was this when we needed it?
Well, it is the official start of summer, right? I mean, so it was a day late and $1 short. Yeah, it'll be warm today in the 70s across New York City. The rain will still be across parts of the Midwest. I'll take the rainfall for sure. This weather's brought to you by Tractor Supply Company, providing pet food, animal feed, and gardening supplies. So here we go. An awful lot of rainfall across South Texas yesterday, and also South Florida. Many areas here picked up between 4 and 6 inches of rain because it was a tropical system here along the Bahamas. It's going to move to the north, maybe clip the Carolinas. Likely not a storm, but a lot more rainfall coming your way. Here's the rain for today: Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. Things are going to get heavy here across parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, even North Florida. Now, North Florida has been very dry. You've heard about all these wildfires down there. They will take the rainfall, just maybe not all at one time. Spread it out just a little bit. Temperatures warming up in D.C., but look at Boston. Tomorrow, 86 degrees. John, what are you going to do about that? You may have to get on the train, get up to your Boston.
Tank top. That's what I'll do about that. Tube top, Speedo. These are the things that you can do when it gets that hot. Chad Myers, thanks very much for being with us. So what should you expect the next time you go to your house of worship? California just announced new guidelines. That's next.
Hello again, everybody.
The Sesame Street crew is back on CNN.
Woo-hoo!
For a new family town hall about COVID-19 and staying safe this summer. Parents, submit questions at cnn.com/Sesame Street.
The kids ask the best questions sometimes.
And remember,
we're all in this together.
The ABCs of COVID-19. A new CNN Sesame Street Town Hall for kids and parents. Saturday on CNN.
I think what we've seen over the last couple months, huge surge in usage for a whole bunch of tools, for Zoom, for Microsoft Teams, for Slack. We saw an enormous surge in new customers, and new teams signing up for Slack, and increased usage among existing customers. And in the long run, I think this is going to open up a lot of possibilities in the software business more broadly. Organizations that thought they could never work remotely, or there would have been a 3 to 5 year transition, when they have to do it in a week, it turns out they can do it in a week, which I think opens up a lot more possibilities for digital transformation. In the medium term, however, I think we still have no real idea how this is going to affect small and medium businesses, what the real economy is going to look like 2 or 3 quarters from now, and how long that's going to take to come back. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag in the medium term. We're surviving pretty well in this work from home and remote work environment. So no pressure to come back to the office.
The pandemic is putting lives and businesses on hold, but many big companies are offering help to those in need. Dating app Bumble is showing the love by connecting female entrepreneurs in the U.S. with up to $5,000 in funding to help keep them in business. Also offering a helping hand, beauty brand Avon is pivoting production to make 600,000 bottles of hand sanitizer. Proceeds go toward a donation of more than $180,000 to UK domestic abuse charity Refuge. The philanthropy arm of Swiss financial services institution UBS is banking on saving lives by matching 10% of donations to the COVID-19 fund. The money will support groups such as Doctors Without Borders, Americares, and the Swiss Red Cross. For more stories on the people making a difference and to find out how you can impact your world, go to cnn.com/impact.
The very first Omega Speedmaster Professional was created in 1957.
And it was really created for motorsports enthusiasts, but it became famous and continues to be famous as the watch that was certified for manned spaceflight by NASA.
3, 2, 1, liftoff. We have a liftoff.
A big part of the appeal is that there is no other watch that has the heritage of aerospace use that it has. It was used for the Gemini missions. It was used for the Apollo missions. It is, to this day, still the official watch used on the outside of the EVA suits that are provided by the Russian Space Agency for the folks up in the International Space Station. And you think about it, a watch from 1957 that was never designed for use in outer space, that has been used in manned space flight more or less continuously ever since the mid-1960s. There's just nothing else out there like it.
To open doors and to unlock secrets, it takes trust. This was the Duchess's first news interview. Trust that you'll be accurate and you'll be fair. It was an unprecedented move. Very eerie. All the roads have been closed off. The Apache attack helicopter. This is what Captain Wales has been flying. What do you do with Crimea? Do you want talks with them? Rare access indeed. That's what it's all about. Max Foster, CNN.
I'm Julia Chatterley. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weeknights on CNN.
I'm David Culver in Wuhan, China.
Tokyo, Japan.
CNN Seoul.
Hong Kong.
Istanbul.
In Athens, Greece.
In northern Italy.
In Copenhagen, Denmark. Madrid, Spain.
CNN, Paris.
In London, and this is CNN.
This is CNN.
So this morning, there's growing concern over coronavirus outbreaks at meat plants, and California is announcing new plans for reopening religious institutions. We have reporters covering all of these stories from coast to coast.
I'm Diane Gallagher in Atlanta. 257 employees at the Tyson Foods poultry plant in Temperanceville, Virginia, have tested positive for COVID-19. That's just about 20% of the roughly 1,280 employees and contractors who were tested for the virus, according to Tyson. Now, most of those people who tested positive did so during a testing event on site the first week of May. Tyson says that it is continuing to screen its employees before they come to work for symptoms, as well as implement social distancing measures like barriers in the break room and work areas.
I'm Jason Carroll in New York. The governor making a major announcement about benefits for first responders. Death benefits for families of first responders will now be provided by state and local governments. That will help the families of hundreds of police, firemen, and paramedics who died as a result of COVID-19. The governor called them frontline heroes, and he said they deserve more than thanks. He also challenged the federal government to do the same.
I'm Dan Simon in San Francisco. Under pressure from a petition of more than 1,200 pastors, as well as President Trump, California Governor Gavin Newsom says churches and other places of worship are now free to reopen, but there are a couple of key provisions. First, Newsom says individual counties can make the final call. Second, attendance must be at 25% of a building's capacity or 100 people, whichever is less. It's also recommended that both staff and guests wear face coverings and that staff be screened for temperature and symptoms at the beginning of their shifts.
I'm Ed Lavandera in Little Rock, Arkansas. This is a state that has reported a little more than 6,000 coronavirus cases since the pandemic started. But 1,000 of those cases, roughly, have come in just the last 5 days. And that is why the governor here is describing what they're seeing as a second peak. The first peak happened a little more than a month ago. But the governor says that he attributes this spike to better testing that's being done in this state. And he says the silver lining is that there is a low hospitalization rate and a low positive infection rate. But when you walk around town here in Little Rock, most people seem completely unfazed by what is happening.
Our thanks to our correspondents around the country. Well, the New York Stock Exchange is set to reopen their trading floor today, but it will look very different. CNN's chief business correspondent Christine Romans joins us to explain. So what are the changes they're making?
Oh, wow. Well, there only be about 25% of the floor staff will be allowed there, and there will be a very different looking New York Stock Exchange with signs on the floors showing social distancing, how far to stay apart. Masks are required, temperature checks, plexiglass barriers erected so that you can keep sort of security guards and traders away from each other. No eating on the trading floor, which is a big difference. I've spent years covering the floor of the stock exchange where, you know, the big lunch rush is always a big part of the day. Liability waivers, we're told, have been required. Many media reporting that you're going to have to sign a waiver that says, you know, I'm not going to hold the New York Stock Exchange responsible if I get coronavirus here. And no public transportation and shaking hands on the trading floor. And guess this is usually a very chummy place. Of course, people in close proximity who've known each other for years. So fewer people, no media allowed to broadcast from there. We'll be reporting from outside of there, and just kind of a very different look.
It sounds like it. Okay, let's talk about Hertz. Hertz Car Rental is not going to survive this time. And why are they failing when the others aren't?
Well, we'll see if the others can hold on. You know, they started with an awful lot of debt, and then suddenly when your customer disappears, you can't pay your debt. They couldn't make those debt payments. You know, about 2/3 of rental car activity comes from airports. You know, flying traffic is down 94% the past couple of months. Other people who rent cars are people who are, you know, traveling for business. They're not doing that. Or a lot of people rent cars when they've had an accident. Well, people aren't driving and getting in accidents as much either. So just the demand has disappeared here. And this is something that I think travel in particular is the epicenter of what's going to be kind of a remade landscape. I'm going to be looking for more bankruptcies for airlines and for car travel agencies and the like in the coming days.
Okay, that's sobering. Let's talk about Moderna. So Moderna, as you know, met with all sorts of great fanfare when they announced last week or 2 weeks ago that there was a potential. They had made progress on a vaccine, a coronavirus vaccine. And then, right after that announcement, there's now word that 2 top executives, their chief financial officer and their chief medical officer, dumped something like $30 million worth of stock. What's that about?
The optics are pretty terrible. So rewind the tape. Last Monday, the stock jumped 30% on very, very early optimism about a vaccine. An optimism that the company itself released in a press release. It wasn't a peer-reviewed journal or anything. Just the company gave a positive press release. The stock jumped 30%. And as regular investors were rushing into the stock, these 2 executives were rushing out and selling stock. And here's why. They had an automated insider trading sales plan that was triggered by this big rally in the stock. Not illegal. Looks bad. Looks like they're profiting from very early news, but not illegal. And this is something that a lot of executives in biotech firms have. It's a plan that's already written out, right? Here's what I think is interesting, and the takeaway is that as we report and read about progress on the vaccine front, we need to be mindful that people who are giving us the news in many cases are profiting from the moves in the stock price as we are reporting and reading about what's happening. So just a reminder to individual investors of just how volatile this can be and how much incentive there is to really let the good news get out there because it pushes the stock price up.
That's a good reality check. Thank you very much, Christine.
You're welcome.
John.
All right, so this story is getting a ton of attention. A white New York woman is apologizing after she called police and said an African-American man was threatening her life. Video of the incident has now gone viral. Amy Cooper was walking her dog Monday in Central Park when she encountered Christian Cooper. Not related. Both tell CNN the dispute began because her dog was not on a leash in an area of the park where it was supposed to be on a leash. Now, Amy can be heard asking him to stop recording her and him telling her not to come close to him. She then called police saying there was an African-American man filming her and threatening her and her dog and asking them to come immediately. Now, when officers did respond, neither Amy Cooper nor Christian Cooper were there. The man, who says he was in the park bird watching, said he just wanted her to put her dog on a leash, and he was very calm. Police say there were no arrests or summons. Amy told CNN she is not a racist and wants to publicly apologize to everyone. Asked if he would accept her apology, Christian told CNN he would, quote, if it's genuine and if she plans on keeping her dog on a leash going forward. Amy Cooper has been placed on leave by her employer following this incident, and she surrendered the dog to the animal shelter she adopted him from while the dispute is being investigated. That's something, and the repercussions are something. It shows the power of video. Just to be clear, this is in a part of the park where it is clear that dogs are supposed to be on leashes. This guy says he's a bird watcher, and bird watchers care a lot about this because the dogs, when they're not on leashes, they go after the birds, and it's a real issue.
I know you speak for bird watchers everywhere, but I mean, based on that video, he looks totally reasonable and rational. She looks irrational during that, but did she have to surrender the dog back to the shelter? I mean, isn't that seems like an awfully stringent repercussion of this little squabble. We will follow the developments for you.
All right, Brazil and Mexico seeing major spikes in coronavirus cases. We have live reports from both countries next.
Half the time I just like to mess around and be creative.
I have this incredible ability to want to destroy clean spaces.
It's more than just an option to be an artist, it is a calling.
These are very exciting times of our lives as creatives.
Africa Avant-Garde, this weekend on CNN.
Let's try 3 times inhaling through the nose.
Deep breaths to help me relax. Sorry. Not so easy when I've just recovered from COVID-19. That's the remnants of the coronavirus.
We are going to reach up and then twist. Your left hand is going to over the right.
Right. I think there are things moving that haven't moved in years.
Right leg, the right hand.
I'll admit it, I'm a yoga novice. Hang on, where's your right foot? Priscilla makes it look so easy. They always say it's better to try and get something than not try at all.
Exactly. You were good.
The straight talk you need from your man in Washington, who won't back down. The Lead with Jake Tapper, Tuesday through Saturday on CNN.
My name is Sebo Widodo. I'm from Indonesia, and then I'm currently living in Lisbon, Portugal, in which currently I'm an entrepreneur. I'm leading a development of a startup called Silicon Valley. We're like a marketplace that combine work opportunity with travel. And then as you can see, both of these things are basically coming to a complete stop. Right now, basically, since the coronavirus, we kind of want to shift the focus a little bit to address sort of a bigger problem, which is we see a lot of people are losing their jobs and then coming to us that complaining that the whole job process itself is basically a hassle, a very tedious process. So now that's kind of where we want to go. So we found this reason to pivot. All of my family are basically in Indonesia, and then which is one of the countries that is pretty heavily affected too. So I'm getting really concerned. And then right now in Lisbon, we're also pretty heavily hit. We're right next to Spain. So my family is also very concerned about me all the time. So but we're always keeping track of each other, you know, FaceTiming every single day. So that's pretty much the way to go until we can make a move and see each other again physically.
Oh yeah, so this is for everybody that's at home right now, you know, going through it. So even with the distance, yeah, I feel so near. Good morning, y'all. Even with the separation of space, you'll be right here. Yeah. We're 6 degrees apart, closer than we've ever been. The stadium is empty, it's the living room we in. Someone tell the land, Lord, hear my cry. We all wear the mask now, fear is a disguise. But who's to
morning, the White House shutting down travel from Brazil 2 days earlier than previously announced. This travel ban now goes into effect tonight at midnight. It comes as virus cases and deaths are soaring in Brazil. CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh live in Sao Paulo with the latest from there. Nick.
Yeah, it will be at the end of today, Eastern Time, that it's no longer possible to fly from Brazil into the United States or to enter the United States if you've been Brazil in the last 14 days. Quite why the White House brought it forwards quite so quickly, unclear. I think we have seen globally a trend that when a ban is announced, there's a sudden surge of people rushing in to get their travelling done before it's impossible, possibly spreading the infection. So there might actually have been some wisdom in saying it's going to be one day, allowing people to travel plan and then bringing it forwards. But there may also be a reflection too, frankly, of the fast rising numbers here. Yesterday's not so awful, 807 dead. That's pretty staggering, but it isn't the worst they've had. And 11,000 new cases, about half, frankly, as the worst daily rise they had about over the weekend or so. But they've brought them up to over 370,000 cases in total. This is not the full picture, though, because it's all about how many people you can test. And so while Brazil is number 2 in the world behind the United States, it clearly doesn't have the ability to measure with the same universality that you guys have been doing in the US. But deep concerns here still about President Jair Bolsonaro's message. He was seen at the weekend not wearing a face mask. They're mandatory here in Sao Paulo and Rio, and in the city of Manaus, where we were just earlier on today. Startling. That is, frankly, the place hit hardest per capita in the country. Large numbers of graves dug there. And just to give you a sense, guys, about what we're talking in terms of the use of testing, in the graveyard we were in, about a fifth of it was positive tested deaths that were certainly coronavirus, and about 4/5 were people who they think may have died from coronavirus. That lets you know really how not entirely adequate the testing is in some areas, how hard it is to know who's got it and who's not got it, and quite how bad it might get in the days ahead, the week, 2 weeks ahead, here in Sao Paulo, when the peak begins to come in. This, a country that frankly hasn't had the government guidance from a presidential level telling people to lock down and prepare. It's been left to local administrations to do that, often being scorned by the president as they try to put those measures in, and we'll see the impact of that in the weeks ahead. John, Alison?
Those images are still so dramatic that you show us. Nick Payton-Walsh, thank you very much from Brazil. Coronavirus is also on the rise in Mexico and causing spikes in border communities. CNN's Matt Rivers is live in Mexico City with more. What's the situation there, Matt?
Yeah, Allison, there's no question that at this point we are in the worst days of this outbreak that Mexico has seen so far. The current death toll now just over 7,600. The current case total just over 71,000. But to put this in a little bit more perspective, take the death toll, for example. Of the 7,600 or so deaths at this point that have been registered, more than 1/2 of them have come in just the last 2 weeks alone. When it comes to the confirmed case total, that number has jumped by nearly 40% in just the last week. So pretty, we can tell that things are absolutely at their worst at this point in Mexico. And it's important to note that those numbers, they might seem relatively low, right? 71,000 cases compared to the US, 7,600 deaths. They're relatively low, and they are. But that is because Mexico does not test at the same rate. This country has one of the lowest testing rates in the entire world. They've only tested around 250,000 people at this point. And that is why health officials will tell us and have told us that the actual number of cases here in this country could be well into the millions. The actual death toll could be double, if not higher, the officially reported total. But Allison, despite all of that, Mexican officials say they do plan to start to reopen certain parts slowly of their economy as soon as next week. Allison.
Okay, Matt, thank you for all of that context. Really helpful. So the first sign of hope for New York sports, the Brooklyn Nets returning to practice. Details in the Bleacher Report next.
As the global economy adjusts to life in lockdown, many businesses are seeking ways to support the fight against COVID-19. With bars in lockdown, AB InBev, the brewery behind Budweiser, is now focusing on how it can support those on the front line. The company is manufacturing and donating over 1 million bottles of hand sanitizer to affected areas across the globe.